Hey everybody, welcome back to RotoCurve, and this is week 3 in FanDuel NFL Daily Fantasy Football, and we're here to talk about tight ends. Last week you heard me talk about maybe this was the possible week to stay away from Rob Gronkowski, and honestly I was thinking about that, and I'm not quite sure why anybody would do that. Of course, in cash games last week he had a tough matchup. I did recommend staying away from him, but in GPPs he was an option that just flat out scored points, and he does that all the time. So with that being said, you're going to hear us talk a lot about Rob Gronkowski as our top tight end every single week, and simply because there's no other real option in that top tier, especially with a guy like Jimmy Graham just not really having the same role as he did last year. So it's really Gronk and everyone else. Now, real quick about Gronkowski is there's really not much else to say about him. It's just the one thing is a lot of people will say, well, yeah, you can't play the same guy every week, can you? I think you can in Rob Gronkowski's case, because I was looking at his numbers and looking at his obviously astonishing consistency and production he's put up in his career. Since the start of 2011, he has only not scored in 17 games, which is absurd. That means in 37 or 38 of 55 games, he scored a touchdown. Gronkowski has 58 touchdowns in 67 career games, and he's a threat to score more than one in almost every game. We saw that in week 1 where he scored 3 touchdowns. So I don't think there's a real reason to fade him pretty much any week, especially considering the alternative you get at tight end. Maybe you get a guy that scores 6 points, 7 points, and that's good. But Gronkowski has the chance to put up 17, 18, even more than that on FanDuel each and every week. So I think he's a guy that you basically have to have in your cash games almost every week, unless there's another option that you want to put in there and maybe spend up on guys like Antonio Brown or Julio Jones. Now, that's enough of Gronkowski. We know he's the top option every week. This week he plays the Jaguars, so that's another good matchup. But let's talk about some other guys, and maybe some tier 2 or tier 3 guys that you might want to use instead of Gronkowski and GPPs, just to get a little bit of a difference. The second guy I wanted to discuss was Travis Kelce, who I think is a GPP option almost every week as well, based on his ability to score touchdowns. And really, the Chiefs still haven't thrown a touchdown to a wide receiver. It's been running backs, it's been tight ends, mostly Kelce in the last 2 years. So he has the opportunity to score a touchdown almost every week. And this week, for week 3, he faces the Green Bay Packers, who have a defense that really tends to struggle against tight ends. In week 1, they allowed Martellus Bennett to catch over 50 yards and a touchdown pass. Week 2, they faced Jimmy Graham and shut him down. But I say that with quotations because Jimmy Graham really is not being used the way that he should be in Seattle. And there's actually been a bit of a discussion about that in Seattle. So the one thing about that is the Packers have allowed a touchdown pass to Bennett, although it did come in garbage time. So a guy like Kelce, who's going to see a lot of targets, especially with a game that they're going to have to score a lot of points to keep up with the Packers. So I do like Kelce as a second-tier option. He costs $1,000, actually $2,000 less on FanDuel. So he gives you a little bit of a cap relief if you're going to be using him in tournaments. And Gronkowski will be highly owned in tournaments. So if you wanted to stay away from him, maybe to get a little bit of an edge in terms of own rates, I do recommend going to a guy like Kelce just in tournaments. I still think Gronkowski is the option for cash. The third tight end I wanted to discuss is a guy that I didn't want to like this week, but his matchup is just too good, and that's Gary Barnidge. You might be thinking, who's Gary Barnidge? And honestly, I thought the same thing after looking through different matchups and looking at research. He's a run-blocking tight end. He's what the Browns have with Jim Dre. They have a lot of guys that are just built to block for the running backs, and Duke Johnson and that Isaiah Crowell. But he faces the Raiders this week, and the Raiders have allowed 2 touchdowns in each of the first 2 games to the tight end. I saw an NFL beat writer tweet during the games that he doesn't think the Raiders know how to cover a tight end or if they're legally allowed to catch a pass. And honestly, he may be right. They're just allowing tight ends to run up and down the field. So I think Barnidge is a guy you only want to play in GPPs if you want to be very contrarian. He's a minimum price play. I don't recommend putting much money on him, but if you're a guy that likes to make a lot of $1, $2 GPP lineups like myself, maybe throw him into 1 or 2. If he catches a touchdown pass, it's well overvalued. His price is just $4,500 on FanDuel. Some other guys to consider for this week at tight end. I do love Jared Cook in a great matchup, and I really like Jordan Reed almost every week now as well. Both those guys are too cheap for my taste, but for a lot of people's taste. But the one thing about that, if you get guys that are cheap and they score a touchdown, you're in there. You're in the money. Now, Reed, I believe, does play on Thursday night, so if you're playing an all-week slate, get him into your lineups then. But Jared Cook is a nice option with Nick Foles going to him against the Steelers, who have really struggled against tight ends as well this season. That pretty much wraps up our tight end segment for this week on FanDuel. Be sure to check out RotoCurve.com and see all the tools. Everything's free. A lot of other analyst articles. I posted others for quarterbacks, running backs, and receivers. So be sure to take a look at everything, and let's make week 3 a profitable one in NHL or NFL. Good luck, everybody.